contemplative practice, all that's necessary is to notice that I'm aware and to become interested in that experience, to become interested in the experience of being aware. Most of us are so fascinated by what we are aware of that we hardly ever even ask ourselves, what is it that is aware of the body, of the mind, and the world? What is it that illuminates my experience? What is it that knows my experience, irrespective of what that experience is? What if we were to cease being so fascinated with what we are aware of and became fascinated with the question, what is it that knows our experience? What could be more important in life than to know the nature of that with which our experience is known? When you have any experience, whether it's a thought, a feeling, or perception, we can experiment with, instead of letting your attention go away from ourself towards the thought, the sensation, or perception, we can trace it back in the other direction. Ask ourselves, what is on this end of attention? The thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are on the other end, connected to what we believe is an outside world. What is on this end, the purely subjective end? If you trace back your attention, your feeling, perception, or thought, away from the known, away from the perceived object, back towards the source of feeling, perception, or thought, what do we find? Try and do that now. Take any experience, no matter what it is. Lose interest in what you are aware of, and trace your attention back to the source of attention. What do you find there? Whatever we find there is what we commonly call I. I know my thoughts. I love my wife. I hear the train. I feel the body. What is this I at the source of attention, the source of feeling, perception, the source of thinking itself? Don't try to focus on it. You can only focus on what you're aware of. You can only fix your attention on an object of thought. Try tracing your attention back to the source, back in the opposite direction, away from anything that you're attending to. This process, if we can call it a process, of tracing back our attention, our feeling or perceptions to their source, is what Ramana Maharshi called self-inquiry. It's what Ouspensky called self-remembering, what Christian mystics call the practice of the presence of God, what the great Zen master Dogen called studying the self. Dogen said, to study the way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self, forget the small self, forget our stories, forget our thoughts about what we believe our personal identity is. This is also sometimes called prayer or meditation. In essence, it's the sinking of the mind, the thinking mind, into the heart, tracing back our experience from the known to the knower. What we find there is nothing from the viewpoint of thought. Thought can only know an object. When we trace our experience back to its source, thought says we find nothing, or no thing, no separate thing. And because thought believes things are real, it believes what is at the source of attention isn't a thing, so it isn't real. So our culture has almost completely overlooked the presence of awareness. It seems you have to study philosophy or a type of universal contemplative path to be taught anything about the source of awareness, the source of our attention itself. So in effect, the most real, most fundamental, substantial, and continuous element of experience is systematically ignored, except in metaphysical studies, which are a very minor part of our cultural dialogue. And this especially is true in Western religious dialogue. What we find when we trace back our source to our source is an unconditionally accepting, boundless openness. It's that which makes all of our experience possible. It's like an open window. There's nothing in the open window. It's just an emptiness that makes the view possible. So when we trace our attention back to this vast openness and view our experience from this vast openness that we are, we begin to see that all our experience is made of the same stuffless stuff of this openness. It's styled or sometimes defined as pure consciousness. It's just things as they are. You know, the great Zen master Suzuki Roshi said, purity is things as they are. And this openness can't be overwhelmed or changed in any way by anything that appears within it. It's like the light of images on the movie screen that are constantly changing, moving, and expressing the vast array of our experiences onto the screen. But the images themselves can't affect the screen at all. We are essentially this openness at the source of awareness, and we gradually realize we are also everything that appears within it as well. We gradually realize that imaginary boundary between self and no self, between inside and outside, is nothing more than the dancing of thought energy across the screen of our awareness. So that energy of thinking doesn't create any separation between the vast openness and what we normally think of as an outside world. The images on the screen, on the movie screen, are made of the screen itself. There's no separation there. The movie screen never changes, and the screen of our awareness never changes. It's in the same pure, pristine condition now as when we were kids. Throughout our whole life, it's always now, and is always just here. It is our own essential, irreducible identity, that part of us that can't be taken away or removed. It's never stained or harmed by any experience. In the absolute sense, it's imperturbable. It's the peace that in the Bible is called the peace that passes all understanding. The great master Krishnamurti deeply embodied the receiving and living as the aliveness of our truly boundless openness. And he was asked on his deathbed, do you have a secret teaching that leads to liberation? And he said, yes. I don't mind what happens.